Now, to get anywhere in to your crankshaft or your water pump or your camshafts, any of those jobs that you want to do, the first thing is to take off your crankshaft pulley or harmonic balancer. So the first thing to take that off is to loosen the crank bolt over here. This crank bolt is very hard to get off because it's torqued very highly, but also because the crankshaft pulley itself will be rotating in the same direction as the bolt when you try to loosen it. So this needs to be kept steady, and that's the big challenge for home mechanics. Okay, so this is the setup I have. I have a chain grip around, and then a wooden block down here just to make sure that the handle of the chain grip is not going to be on anything that's movable, but actually go against the actual frame here at the bottom. So this is pretty solid over here, and the chain grip is going to keep that pulley in place as I loosen that up. This is the view from the top. As you can see, the chain is not actually contacting the ribs of the pulley, but I put a short piece of serpentine belt over the pulley to protect it against the chain. So this is my setup from the outside. I have my jack up on the level to try and get these extensions as straight as possible going into that crank bolt. The crank bolt is a 22mm socket, and I have to bring it outside of the vehicle so I have enough leverage with the breaker bar to try and get that bolt loose. This is a 24-inch breaker bar, but I'm putting on just a pipe of rolled paper to give me some more leverage, and hopefully that will be able to get the job done. There it goes. What a relief to get that loose over there, because that's the biggest problem that we often have to get anything done. There it is. Missed the crank bolt. So just to make your life easier, these two holes over here you will need for your harmonic balancer puller, and they might not be lined up. Like mine was this in this direction. So then just put your crank bolt back in and just use that to rotate the crank pulley in this direction so you could see both of those holes clearly, and just take the crank bolt out again. Okay, so now what you want to do is just put your harmonic balancer puller in and just tighten that up. Now that you've got that mounted, it's just a matter of cranking it up and pulling it out. And then it comes off like that. Now I'm just going to support my engine block from the bottom as I loosen the engine mount from the top. Okay, so we'll take this engine mount off here and these brackets. You're looking at 12mm bolts and 14mm bolts. So let's get started. look at the sizes and you see that the long one goes on this side, and as you saw, the short one goes in there, and this one goes in there. The next thing you want to do is to get this bracket off here. And if you're lucky enough, it's just going to pull off. It just has one guiding pin down there. Now we have access to the timing belt cover here, but just to make life easier for ourselves, we'll just remove some of these pipes and hoses here. So now I'm just placing a bungee cord in here, and I'm going to just loop it around, just to keep the wiring over here away from our timing belt cover. Gives us more access now. So now we're set up to take off the timing belt cover. So the next thing to do is to take this little bracket off. This is a 12mm nut. You open this up and it just slides out here from the alternator's pivot bolt. So the next thing you want to do is take off the top timing belt cover, and there are 7 of these 10mm little bolts all around. 1, 2, 3, 1 at the back is 4, and then 3 at the bottom. So when it comes to your bottom timing cover, you've got 3 bolts, 10mm, one up there. This doubles up between, it's the 7th one of the top cover and the 1st one of the bottom cover. That's your 2nd one in there, and this is your 3rd one right here. So just remove all 3 of those and you'll be able to remove both covers. So I first remove the bottom timing cover, and then I come up top here and I remove the top one. And it's just the back part here that could be a little bit tricky to maneuver out. So now you put your crank bolt back in, and what you're going to do is you're going to rotate your engine to get it to top dead center. You always want to move forward, to turn your engine forward and never backwards. So you keep rotating this now till you get to top dead center. So what you'll see is there's a little notch here in the cam sprocket, and there's a notch there at the back of the timing belt cover. And I just mark those with a pen just so it's easy to line them up. But you want to line up this cam over here, and then you want to line up the cam at the back, and then you want to line up your crankshaft. You see there's a little dimple there, and that lines up with the with a little tab behind it. I marked those as well. So when you have your crank and both of your cams, everything lined up, it's a good idea just to mark it with a marker, and make it easier in the future if you want to line them up again. But this is then top dead center. The next thing you want to do is take this bracket off over here, and what you have is 12mm bolt over here, another 12mm bolt over there, the same size, and then just underneath you have a 12mm nut that you have to open up. Once you've got these bolts out, you'll see that they're too long to completely remove, but you don't have to. Just pull them out as far as you can, like that, and then the whole bracket just comes right off. Okay, so now you want to remove the tensioner. It has two 12mm bolts. Since there's tension on this thing, you want to alternate between the two bolts as you remove them. You'll see this pin over here. This needs to be compressed again with a vise, and then you need to put in a retaining pin into this little hole. It goes through that hole. It'll keep it contained when you want to reinstall it. If you're going to get a new tensioner, then you don't need to worry about this, but if you want to reuse your tensioner, then that's what you need to do. So when you want to take off the water pump, the first thing is to get your drain pan underneath, because once you remove the water pump, all the coolant is going to go down. Even though you've drained your system, there's still some coolant in there. So that's the first thing. Get your drain pan underneath, and then you start loosening these bolts. You have 4 bolts, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you have 2 nuts down there. All of them are 10mm. See the water coming out already. Now the pressure has been loosened. I have mostly water in the system because I've been flushing the coolant system, so mostly water coming out, but that's it. Just takes a little bit of angle to get this out. And then you can have your gasket come off. In this case it's a metal gasket, which is great, no scraping to do. Then you want to make sure you clean up the area. Now when you install your new gasket, this is going to be a metal one, of course, and don't worry about going the wrong way around, because it can only go in one way. The next thing you want to do is just push in your water pump, and then you're going to put in the nuts and bolts. I like to screw these in by hand as far as I can, so there's no possibility of cross-threading them and then getting stuck. I like to do it with a 1/4 inch drive, so I don't put too much torque on these. Now what you want to do is just as you tighten these, you could either, if you're very experienced, just use your 1/4 inch ratchet, but I'm going to use a torque wrench, and it's going to be, there we go, it's going to be 8 Newton meters, or 71 inch pounds. There we go. That's it, and then your water pump's installed. So when you look at your timing belt, you'll see little arrows pointing to the front. This will be towards the front of the engine, and then there's a dotted line that is going to go with your crank pulley, and then higher up you'll see two solid markings, and these will go with your cam sprockets. So those are the three markings that you should pay attention to when you install the belt. So the first place you want to put your timing belt is with your crank pulley. I just put a little clamp in there to keep it in place. So once you've got your belt around your crank pulley, the next thing you want to do is go around this pulley over here. This isn't. And then bring it to the front. Go across this pulley over here, and then you come to the front sprocket here. And now you want to line up this line with that mark over there on your front sprocket. Then you dip underneath this idler pulley over here, and then you go towards your back cam sprocket. This is where you want to loosen the clamp you had down here. Once you've got your timing belt installed, you're going to take some clips and just make sure that it doesn't move from where you have it. And once you've clipped this on both sides so it's not going to move on you, and it'll stay in place, then you go down to the bottom and fit the tensioner for the timing belt. This is what the auto tensioner looks like, and it'll take up the slack on the left hand side of the timing belt. It just gets bolted on from underneath like that, and once it's in place, then you pull this pin. Inside there's a piston that's under pressure, and once the pin is pulled, the tension is released and it pushes up to create the tension for the timing belt. So this just needs to be bolted in, and then once it's in place, this gets pulled out and the tension automatically is going to stabilize the belt. As you can see, these are the two bolts. Just screw these in and the whole tensioner moves up, and then once it's in position, the pin gets pulled and the tension is released. So now the next thing you want to do is you want to turn over your engine twice and see if you're still in alignment. So put your crank bolt back in, and then you'll turn the engine over here with a crank bolt. Always turn it to the right in the clockwise direction. And this orange line here will be our mark. We'll bring that around twice and then see if we're still in alignment. Once you've cranked your engine over twice and all your alignment marks, all three of them, the two cam sprockets and the crank at the bottom, everything still lines up. It shows that your timing belt has been installed correctly, and you can go ahead and just cover it up, put everything back together again. Now you want to install this engine mount, and it's helpful to put your long bolt in place before you actually place it in here. So both the bolts as well as this nut, everything here is 21 foot-pounds on my vehicle, but you want to torque these up to spec. All the bolts here as well as the nut, everything on this engine mount is going to be torqued to 21 foot-pounds on my vehicle. Just make sure you've got the right specs for yours. So now we'll put the outer cover on, and these are all, I had 9 little bolts in all, top and bottom. We put the top in first because the bottom overlaps with the top. Just snug these up, they don't have to be extra tight. So when we install the bottom cover, it's going to overlap over there and over there with the top cover, and we're just going to make them snug again. Now it's time to install our crank pulley, and we'll put some dielectric grease inside. So as we put it on, we just make sure it goes on in the right orientation. That sleeve in there. And then the crank bolt goes in. Once we have that in, we are going to torque this bad boy up to, on my vehicle, 159 foot-pounds. So when it comes to torquing this crank bolt, we do the same setup with the chain wrench, keeping it stable, and then applying the torque to the bolt itself. All right, let's get this bad boy torqued up. I need some extra leverage. A good old pipe comes in. There we go. And there we are. 159 foot-pounds. Now it is time to put your power steering drive belt on. It goes on the back of the pulley here. And then it goes around the power steering pulley. Now you're going to lower your power steering pump and then just fasten this lock nut over here to lock it in place. So once you've got this secured, check your play. You don't want more than ½ an inch in there, then you're good. Okay, to put in the serpentine belt, or as some call it, the generator belt, it can go from the top. It's probably easiest to start with it around your AC pump and then go around your crank pulley. And then bring it up. And then you come up with your alternator here on the top. Once you think you've got it seated, you can go down below and just make sure that it's seated all the way around. And once you know it's good to go, you're going to adjust your alternator again. So now we'll take this wiring harness off here, and we will put that back on the timing belt cover, and you'll see where it just. So now we're going to put the engine mount bracket back on here. Now it's time for this bracket to go on there. The torque on these 3 bolts on my vehicle is 23 foot-pounds. The torque on these 2 bolts on my vehicle is 47 foot-pounds. Now you just connect everything you disconnected in the beginning. Now for the moment of truth, when we start the engine and see if our job is done. That sounds great. So job well done, everything working well.